Washington Journal continues.
This is Mike Davis. He is the founder and president of an organization known as the Article 3 Project. Also, in his previous career, served as the former chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee, served in that position from 2017 to 2019. Mr. Davis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Pedro.
Could you talk about the Article 3 Project, particularly what does it do specifically, and how are you financially backed?
Yeah, so I started the Article 3 Project back in 2019 when I left the Senate Judiciary Committee. I was the top nominations counsel for the confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, along with several lower court judges. I worked for then Chairman Chuck Grassley from my home state of Iowa, so when he left, I decided to go start the Article 3 Project to fight for President Trump's judicial nominees from the outside. So we make the positive case for the judicial nominees like Judge Amy Coney Barrett. We fight back against the left's attacks on the nominees. We defend the confirmation process. So when the Democrats are saying that the process is, rigged or unfair, we can point to historical practices and precedents to defend the process. Then we also punch back on what I call the left's assaults on judicial independence. Their radical plans like court packing, term limits, and impeachment. And our funding is from small dollar donors across America. You can go to our website at article3project.org, article number 3project.org, and there is a donation link.
When you talk about Judge Amy Coney Barrett, did your organization have a direct hand in her nomination?
Did we have a direct hand in her nomination, meaning did we help pick her?
Yes.
No, we did not. We are not in the judge picking business. We are in the judge confirming business. And so it's the president's job to pick these judicial nominees in consultation with senators. And we support President Trump's judicial nominees, whoever the president picks.
Talk a little bit about your previous career, because I want to ask you, when a candidate comes before the Senate Judiciary Committee in this confirmation process, there was a lot with Judge Barrett this week about how much she didn't say on certain issues. Given your direct experience, how much of that is a common feature when it comes to people who are in that chair doing similarly to what she does?
Well, it should be a uniform feature because as a judicial nominee, especially if you're a sitting judge, like Judge Amy Coney Barrett is, she's a sitting judge on the Seventh Circuit, it is their ethical duty as a sitting judge or a judicial nominee not to answer these questions about how they will rule on future cases, and there's a reason for this. Think about it as a litigant, and you are getting ready to go before a Justice Barrett on the Supreme Court, and you found out later that Supreme Court nominee Judge Barrett made some backroom deal with a senator. She exchanged her vote on a future case for that senator's vote for her confirmation. It's just not how our system works. It's unethical. It's unseemly, and so she's done what every Supreme Court nominee should do, including what the late Justice Ginsburg said that she did, which was to provide no hints, no forecast. It's not the job of Supreme Court nominees to go assure senators how they're going to vote on future cases.
Is it fair to say, or at least from your experience, because if I believe it correctly, you were directly involved in the confirmation process of Brett Kavanaugh, correct me if I'm wrong, and Neil Gorsuch, correct me if I'm wrong on those fronts?
Yeah, I was involved with the Chief Justice Roberts' confirmation when I worked in the Bush 43 White House, along with Justice Alito, and then I was the outside leader of Justice Gorsuch's confirmation. I was his former law clerk and friend, and so I helped him get through the confirmation process back in 2017, and then I was the Senate staff leader for Justice Kavanaugh's confirmation process in 2018, and this is the way that Judge Barrett answered these questions, or did not answer these questions, is how judicial nominees are supposed to handle those questions.
Would you say those three gentlemen then did the same exact type of style of Amy Coney Barrett, or did they go further as far as explaining their reasonings behind certain decisions?
I think Judge Barrett did a fantastic job of explaining her judicial philosophy of textualism and originalism. I think she handled it perfectly. She talked about how she would go about deciding cases, what she would look for, her judicial philosophy, but she just did not go over that ethical line of saying how she would rule on future cases, and she did not go over that ethical line about saying what previous cases were rightly or wrongly decided, because then it tips her hand. It shows litigants how she would rule on future cases, and that is not her job as a judicial nominee or a sitting judge.
But would you say that the three previous gentlemen were more forthcoming on those type of issues?
I wouldn't say they were more forthcoming. I just think that Judge Barrett was, I think she was a better, and I'm friends with Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh. I think that they should watch her tape, because they should learn. They can learn a lot about how the model Supreme Court nominee should answer those questions and go through the process. They did fine. They were great. You'll notice that Judge Barrett didn't have any notes when she was going through her hearing process. Both Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh had a lot of notes, and so I don't know, those two Ivy Leaguers couldn't keep up with Judge Barrett.
So our guest will be with us until 8:45, and if you want to ask questions of him, you can do so on the phone lines if you wish this morning. Go ahead and call. You can also post on our Twitter feed, our Facebook page available to you as well if you want. And you can talk to Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. Mr. Davis, when you heard Democratic senators particularly talk to Judge Barrett over concerns about the future of the Affordable Care Act, the future of women's rights, what came across your mind when you saw that line of questioning?
I thought it was just the typical political nonsense that you hear at these Supreme Court hearings. These judges are going to do what judges do, which is look at the facts, look at the law, apply the law to those facts, and let the chips fall where they may. It's just nonsense to think that Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a mother of 7 kids, including one with Down syndrome, is on some sort of mission from God to overturn Obamacare or any other case. It's silly season at the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it happens every time, but it's just nonsense.
So we'll show you a little bit of that questioning directly. This is Senator Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota Democrat, asking the judge, particularly when it comes to the future of the Affordable Care Act, and here's some of that exchange.
One of President Trump's campaign promises in 2015 was that his judicial appointments will do the right thing on Obamacare. You can see it right here. And in fact, Judge, just one day after you were nominated, this is like a few weeks ago, he said also on Twitter that it would be a big win if the Supreme Court strikes down the health law. So, Judge, my first question, do you think we should take the president at his word when he says his nominee will do the right thing and overturn the Affordable Care Act?
Senator Klobuchar, I can't really speak to what the president has said on Twitter. He hasn't said any of that to me. And what I can tell you, as I have told your colleagues earlier today, is that no one has elicited from me any commitment in a case or even brought up a commitment in the case. I am 100% committed to judicial independence from political pressure. So whatever people's, party platforms may be or campaign promises may be, the reason why judges have life tenure is to insulate them from those pressures. So I take my oath seriously to follow the law, and I have not pre-committed, nor would I pre-commit to decide a case any particular way.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Davis, as far as the response of Judge Barrett, how would you rate that?
I think it was a great response. I mean, she wrote in her Senate Judiciary questionnaire before her hearing that she had no conversations, zero conversations with anyone, including the president, any senator, or anyone else, how she would rule on any particular case. She testified clearly at her hearing that she did not have any conversation with anyone. It's just silly. These are the same Democrats who have been arguing since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973 that Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices are going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And here we are 47 years later, and Roe versus Wade is still there. This is just trying to scare voters for the election here coming up in a couple weeks.
Again, our guest with us, if you support the confirmation of Judge Barrett, 202-748-8000. If you oppose it, 202-748-8001. If you're undecided about it, 202-748-8002, and you can also text us at 202-748-8003. Leading up to the confirmation hearings this week, Mr. Davis, there were questions, or at least there were concerns from some expressed about if her religious faith was going to come into view. Now that it's over, what did you think about generally those type of questions? Did they exist in this couple of rounds that she went through?
So the Democrats have a pattern and practice of scrutinizing Republican judicial nominees about their Catholic faith. We saw this in 2017 when Senator Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that the dogma lives loudly within you to then Seventh Circuit nominee Judge Barrett, and that was of concern to Dianne Feinstein. You had Senator Dick Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, who also serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee, asking Judge Barrett whether she was an Orthodox Catholic, whatever the heck that means. We saw Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii and Senator Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee, grilling Judge Busher from Nebraska when he went through the nominations process in 2018 for his involvement, his membership in the Catholic men's charity, the Knights of Columbus. So there is a clear pattern and practice of anti-Catholic bigotry by Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats. I just gave you 4 of the 10 who demonstrated that over the last several years. This time I think they were more careful about their anti-Catholic bigotry. It was more, I think they were leaving it to the outside groups to attack Judge Barrett as she went through this confirmation process. We saw the outside Democrat operatives, including those with blue check marks on Twitter, attacking Judge Barrett for her Catholic faith, attacking her family through this process. There was a Democrat operative who said that Judge Barrett was racist because she adopted 2 children from Haiti. So there's plenty of hatred out there in the Democrat Party and on the left for Judge Barrett's faith and family.
The Associated Press highlighted in a story leading up to this saying if Judge Barrett is indeed confirmed, a total of 6 Catholics on the court. What do you think of that impact? Or do you think it will have an impact?
I don't think it will have an impact. I'm Catholic. I went to 13 years at Catholic school, and I know that when I'm serving as a lawyer, I can separate my personal views from my legal views, and I don't recall these types of questions being asked of a Muslim judicial nominee who's gone through the process, or a Jewish judicial nominee who's gone through the process, or an atheist judicial nominee who's gone through the process. I find it very interesting that the left is particularly concerned about Catholics, and I think it goes to the fact that the left is beholden to Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. So they're very concerned that Catholics who are pro-life are going to cut into their bottom line.
This is Mike Davis joining us, by the way, founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Article3project.org is their website if you want to check them out. We have calls lined up for you. Our first call is from Ralph. He's from Augusta, Georgia, who is opposed to Judge Barrett's confirmation. Ralph, you're on with our guest, Mike Davis. Go ahead.
Yes. My concern is, yes, she didn't answer any question, but the president said what he wanted in his next judge. Then you got all of the Republicans came out, asked their questions, and before they began to ask the question, they had already made their mind up that she was going to be put into office. Now, if she didn't talk to them and give them some idea, but when the Democrat asked the question, then they were wrong. We want to know, she says she's an originalist. Well, the original Constitution, it leaves people out like me as a black man, and I'm concerned about that But you keep talking about this is the practice, and I do this. If a Muslim would put up there, you know you would have some concern. That's all. That's my concern. How is that can happen?
Okay.
Thank you, and I'll listen for your answer.
Thank you, Ralph. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Thank you, Ralph. Number one, I would not have any concern about a Muslim or a Jewish nominee or any other nominee. We have Article 6 in the U.S. Constitution that says that we can't have a religious test for people who are going to serve as officers of the United States, including judges. Number two, about originalism. Originalism is where you look at the text of the Constitution and what that text meant to the people at the time that it was enacted. And you talked about your race, that you would be left out with originalism. That's just a complete misunderstanding of originalism. You have to also look at, as an originalist, that the Constitution was amended with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the Civil War Amendments, and then the 19th Amendment with women. And so the originalist would look at those same amendments, the Civil War Amendments or the 19th Amendment, just like they would look at any other part of the Constitution.
From Omaha, Nebraska, we will hear from Mark. Mark is a supporter of Judge Barrett. Mark, good morning. You're on with our guest.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Hey, I was really impressed with the nomination and the process. I thought that Barrett, I've really watched these processes through the years since Clarence Thomas, and I feel that she was probably the most smartest nominee we've ever had. She was so bright, but she was so gracious too, because you could tell when these lawyers on the Senate were questioning her, she was so far superior intellectually that she wouldn't show how smart she was. She was actually dumbing down her responses so they could understand it. She was just brilliant. And I am from Nebraska, and I did think, and I don't always agree with Ben Sass, but I thought he was one of the best people up there. I'd like who did you think was the best questioners and stuff like that of Barrett? But Barrett's going to be a rock star. Young girls all over the world are going to, she's the first person that someone will really look up to and stuff and admire, being a mom and all that. She's just terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, Judge Barrett was I think she was the best nominee that I've ever seen. Actually, I think she's the best witness I've ever seen, let alone nominee or judicial nominee. She was phenomenal. And she really demonstrated at her confirmation hearing this week that she is exceptionally well qualified for the job. She's 48 years old. She graduated #1 in her class from Notre Dame Law School. She served as the executive editor of the Law Review. She served in 2 very prestigious clerkships, including for the late Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court. She has been a Notre Dame law professor for the last 18 years, including her last 3 years on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, where she has participated in about 600 opinions, including writing on about 100 of those. She was phenomenal. I mean, everyone got to see it at her hearing. Even the Liberal American Bar Association said that she was well qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. She was right out of central casting. I thought that both Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh were great nominees, exceptional nominees, but I don't think that they were able to keep up with Judge Barrett, who was just phenomenal. She was in a league of her own.
Let me follow up then on the caller's question about the questioners themselves, members of the Senate. Who stood out, both on the Republican and Democratic side?
I mean, I agree that Senator Ben Sass from Nebraska is a really good questioner. They all do a good job. Well, I shouldn't say that they all do a good job. Most of them do a good job. On the Democrat side, I think Durbin is very effective. He tries to come across as moderate and reasonable when he's not. He's actually very partisan, but he does a very effective job at questioning. Senator Coons is I think he's like the Durbin light. He tries to be effective. He tries to come off as reasonable and moderate. Again, he's not. He's partisan. You know, I think that there are questioners like Macy Hirono where you just want to turn the TV off. They're just so bad. But you know, overall, I think that it was a good hearing for Judge Barrett, and she handled the questions on both sides, from the Democrats and the Republicans masterfully.
What difference did it make, do you think, that since she's a known commodity before this committee because she had to appear for them for her judgeship, did that make any difference, do you think?
I mean, sure. I think the Democrats changed their tactics this time. Last time, as we discussed, I think Democrats realized they stepped into it by attacking her Catholic faith. And so this time I think that they were a lot more careful about that. You know, you're hearing groups like Demand Justice, led by Brian Fallon. They're very upset that Senator Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Brian and Demand Justice don't think that that Senator Feinstein was tough enough on Judge Barrett. They don't think she was tough enough during the process, and so they're calling for her to step down as the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. But I actually think that what Senator Feinstein, how she handled it, was very smart. I think Senator Feinstein realized that last time the Democrats, with Kavanaugh anyway, they really stepped into it with how they handled the Kavanaugh confirmation, where they were just screaming and yelling within, you saw Kamala Harris screaming within 8 seconds of the hearing starting. The first hearing, this was the paper cut hearing, not even the second hearing with Dr. Ford. And so I think Dianne Feinstein was the adult in the room this time and saw that last time the Democrats made a spectacle of themselves and 4 Senate Democrats got sent into early retirements, in part because of the way the Kavanaugh confirmation went. And so I think Dianne Feinstein was smarter this time in ensuring that it was a dignified or a more dignified process. And that upsets people like Brian Fallon and Demand Justice.
From Michigan in Bessemer, this person who opposes Judge Barrett. Nikki, good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning, Pedro. Good morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning.
I don't have a problem with Judge Barrett, but I do think that it would be a lot better, and a lot of us would support if she would step back and wait till after the elections. Can you tell me why she wouldn't do that? Why the Republicans wouldn't wait until after the elections? I think it would be a calmer situation. Thank you very much.
No, it's a fair point. I would say that if you look at historically how the Senate has handled the president's Supreme Court nominees during a presidential election year, I think there have been 29 Supreme Court nominees during a presidential election year, and 90% of the time when the president and the Senate are of the same party, the Supreme Court nominee is confirmed, and 90% of the time when they're of different parties, they're not confirmed. You can call it the 90% rule. In this case, the president is a Republican, the Senate is a Republican. The American people have spoken. The president serves 4 years in office, not just 3 or 3.5. And so they're expected to perform their constitutional duty. Remember last time you had Democrats like Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, saying that this is it for Merrick Garland, saying that Republicans had a constitutional duty to consider his nomination. And so if you have a constitutional duty when there's a Democrat president, wouldn't you have the same constitutional duty when there's a Republican president?
Do you think this was marred by Senator Graham himself when, and I forget the exact time frame, but maybe a year plus ago, when he said this thing exactly wouldn't happen, exactly did happen as far as nominating a person in this way at this time frame?
I don't recall exactly what Chairman Graham said at the time, but I would just say I think that the Kavanaugh confirmation changed a lot of minds in the Senate. There were a lot of senators like Senator Graham who were more, institutionalist, the Senator Grahams of the world, the Senator Dianne Feinsteins of the world, who were concerned more about, the institution. And I think that when the Democrats blew up the institution by accusing Justice Kavanaugh of serial gang rape last time, 6 allegations of sexual abuse, including by the likes of Michael Avenatti and his lying client, Julie Swetnick, I think that Democrats, may not be on the highest moral ground to talk about norms. When Democrats are in their 2020 Democrat National Committee platform, long before Justice Ginsburg died, when they are calling for packing the Supreme Court, that means adding new justices to the Supreme Court, something that has not been done in over 150 years. 1869, right after the Civil War, FDR tried to pack the court back during the New Deal era. It was even too radical for the American voters, for FDR. The late Justice Ginsburg recently came out and made the extraordinary public denouncement of court packing. It was too radical for Justice Ginsburg because she saw it as an assault on judicial independence, because it is. So when Democrats are falsely accusing Supreme Court justices of serial gang rape and threatening to pack the Supreme Court, I don't think that Republicans are going to care very much about their feelings this time.
As far as the particulars, if there were expansions of the Supreme Court, how does that work?
That's a very good question. It's in the Democrat National Committee platform. They don't call it court packing explicitly because that would be too honest with American voters, so they use euphemisms. They talk about structural reform, court reform. What it would mean is expanding the number of justices. There again, we've had 9 justices on the Supreme Court since 1869. And the Democrats want to add at least 2 seats to the Supreme Court, maybe more, maybe 5, who knows. So you'd go from 9 to 11 or more, and then the Democrats would, and they'd be able to do this. If Joe Biden wins and Kamala Harris wins, the Democrats would almost certainly win the Senate, so they would have full Democrat control, the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives. They would nuke the legislative filibuster in the Senate, something that we've had since the 1830s, so they would lower the vote threshold from 60 to 51 votes, and then they would, in their platform, they're talking about adding D.C. and Puerto Rico, maybe the Virgin Islands as states. So you'd have 2, 4, maybe 6 new Democrat senators, and they would just pass legislation, and they would expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court, and then the president would nominate very liberal Supreme Court nominees, and they would overturn precedent. And there goes many of our rights, including our free speech rights, our association rights, our rights to worship, our rights to protect ourselves through the Second Amendment. There's a lot on the line this November.
From Port Orange, Florida, a supporter of Judge Barrett, this is Steve for our guest, Mike Davis. He's the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Steve, go ahead. Steve from Port Orange, go ahead, please. Okay, we'll move on to Ramona. Ramona from Pompano Beach, Florida, who opposes the nomination. Ramona, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a sham, and referring to Republicans saying, well, because they treated Brett Kavanaugh so poorly. These women didn't make these charges up, and believe me, it was no fun to them to bring them up. They brought them up for the good of the country. Now they've had to live with a smear campaign. Their families are targeted, etc. They didn't want to bring them up. These were not sham accusations. He was a drunk that attacked women, just like Trump. And of course, a fine-looking white man like yourself wouldn't understand it. If it was happening to you, I'm sure you would understand much better.
Ramona, since we're talking about Judge Barrett and her process, do you have a question for our guest on that front?
He said the Republicans were mad because of the way Brett Kavanaugh was treated, and that was way after they said no to the Democrats' pick. So because they didn't change their mind because of Kavanaugh, they said no to our pick. They should have stuck with their president. They changed the law at that point. Yes, there's a law that it says they have to pick a judge, but they set a precedent when they said that they weren't going to do it in an election year.
Okay. We'll let her Guess respond.
I would just say quickly, Ramona, there were 6 allegations of essentially serial gang rape against then Judge Kavanaugh during his process. I was the staff leader for the chairman during that time, and we chased down every one of those leads. Several of them, one of them admitted that they were lying. There was a Jeffrey Catalan from Rhode Island who recanted his allegation of Brett Kavanaugh and a friend gang raping a woman on a boat in Newport, Rhode Island. We saw Michael Avenatti with his clearly lying client, Julie Swetnick. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, made several criminal referrals last Congress for people who made false statements to the Judiciary Committee related to Kavanaugh's confirmation.
Randy is next. Randy in Rome, New York, a supporter of Judge Barrett. Hello.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Davis, number one, for the work that you do, and thank you, C-SPAN, for giving these shows to us so Americans can get informed. Mike, I have just a couple questions. Number one, I don't know if you saw Vice President Biden's town hall last night, but do you know what he was talking about when he said there were ways to adjust the life tenure of justices? And then I have another question after that.
So I did not watch the town hall, but I know that Democrats are talking about this, which is, again, part of the radical assaults on judicial independence that the Democrats are pushing are court packing, which we discussed, term limits, which could be what the former vice president is discussing, and they're also talking about impeaching Justice Kavanaugh, which is just all 3 of them are crazy, but it's the Democrats are pushing all 3. I think what they're talking about with term limits is there are plans out there where they're going to let justices serve on the Supreme Court for like 18 years, and then they rotate off the Supreme Court and go ride circuit on the lower courts. I would just remind people that lifetime tenure is guaranteed in the Constitution, and the reason we have lifetime tenure along with pay protection, meaning you can't throw federal judges out of their job and you can't lower their pay so long as they're under the Constitution. They use the word good behavior, but it's so long as they're doing their job and not being corrupt. The reason we have that is to have judicial independence. So we have judges who are solely focused on the law and not worried about what their next job is going to be if they don't rule the right way in a case. And so we insulate judges intentionally from the political process for that very reason.
That was Randy in Rome, New York, with Mike Davis, our guest from the Article 3 Project. Mr. Davis, you probably saw during the confirmation process the questioning that Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse brought when it comes to groups behind the nomination process. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say and get your response to it.
And then Roe, Obamacare cases, and Obergefell, gay marriage. National Organization for Marriage, the big group that opposes same-sex marriage, says in this proceeding, all our issues are at stake. The Republican platform says it wants to reverse Obergefell. And the Republican brief filed in the case said same-sex relationships don't fall within any constitutional protection. So when we say the stakes are high on this, it's because you've said the stakes are high on this. You have said that's what you want to do. So how are people going about doing it? What is the scheme here? Let me start with this one. In all cases, there's big anonymous money behind various lanes of activity. One lane of activity is through the conduit of the Federalist Society. It's managed by was managed by a guy named Leonard Leo, and it's taken over the selection of judicial nominees. How do we know that to be the case? Because Trump has said so over and over again. His White House counsel said so. So we have an anonymously funded group controlling judicial selection run by this guy, Leonard Leo. Then in another lane, we have, again, anonymous funders running through something called the Judicial Crisis Network, which is run by Carrie Severino. And it's doing PR and campaign ads for Republican judicial nominees. It got single $17 million donation in the Garland-Gorsuch contest. It got another single $17 million donation to support Kavanaugh. Somebody, perhaps the same person, spent $35 million to influence the makeup of the United States Supreme Court. Tell me that's good. And then over here, you have a whole array of legal groups, also funded by dark money, which have a different role. They bring cases to the court. They don't wind their way to the court, Your Honor. They get shoved to the court by these legal groups, many of which ask to lose below so they can get quickly to the court to get their business done there. And then they turn up in a chorus, an orchestrated chorus of amici.
Mr. Davis, what do you think of that assessment?
So I've listened to Senator Whitehouse for when I was on the committee, and I listened to him from the outside. Lots of conspiracy theories with Senator Whitehouse. These are good people who are involved in our democracy and the process. President Trump in 2016, as a candidate, put out a list of people who from this list he would select for the Supreme Court. He publicly campaigned on the fact that he would work with outside groups like the Heritage Foundation and Leonard Leo at the Federalist Society. The American people like what they saw on this list. The American people liked what they saw with his having these groups involved with this process. It's been the most transparent process of any presidency. No other president has put out Supreme Court lists. President Trump has updated that list 3 times now. I think there are like 44 potential Supreme Court nominees on his list, and to say that this is nefarious is just silly. There are groups on the left who are heavily involved in judicial selection. The abortion industry, Planned Parenthood, and the abortion industry spends tens of millions of dollars on these judicial fights. There are groups that the American Constitution Society, or ACS, is the liberal version of the Federalist Society. And, to suggest that there's corruption involved here is just, I would expect nothing less of Senator Whitehouse, who, has been a blowhard the entire time he's been in the Senate. Aside
from the groups mentioned, are you concerned about the dollar figures that are involved in these processes, and does it sway eventually the effectiveness of a nominee once he or she gets to the court?
It does not sway a nominee at all. If you see, I helped Justice Gorsuch go through the process from the outside. I served as one of his first law clerks, both on the 10th Circuit, and then when he went on the Supreme Court, I served as one of his first law clerks for the first several months to help him get set up. I saw Justice Kavanaugh go through this process. It's the same person, it's the same judge, whether before they're nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court as they are after. I think Judge Barrett, in her questionnaire, testified that she had no discussions with anyone. I don't even know if she's had a discussion with Leonard Leo about anything, let alone about, she's clearly not had a discussion with him about how she will rule on cases. This is just Senator Whitehouse trying to demonize the process and demonize the people who are involved in this process.
Lawrence, Kansas is next. This person opposes the nomination. Jeremy, you're on with our guest, Mike Davis. Go ahead.
Thank you. We should probably be talking specifically about Article 3, Section 3 in relationship to what Sheldon Whitehouse actually laid out there. And I'd like to point to 3 moments in the hearings that tell us exactly about it. But first, what Whitehouse is actually pointing out, and to call it a conspiracy theory in a court full of the theory of conspiracy, i.e. such things as RICO statutes, racketeering, conspiracy, corruption. This is exactly what Senator Whitehouse laid out, is that big, dark money powers who, of course, led the way on the Citizens United corporate personhood thing, Justice Kennedy, right, who Kavanaugh replaced. The question that was never asked by the Democrats to Kavanaugh is who paid off his $1 million debt. We are aware
okay,
now.
but caller, I'm sorry, because we're running out of time. You wanted to ask 3 points, so make those points so our guest can address them.
Okay, the Senator Sheldon Whitehouse watched that. Then the softball question by Senator Sass on the First Amendment to the so-called textualist and originalist Barrett about the First Amendment, and she couldn't even name the fundamental core or personally held rights in the First Amendment, and she had no judicial philosophy about why it was so important. And then finally, the closing of Senator Feinstein and Senator Compromise Graham, financed by the Ukrainian oligarch Len Blavatnik, hugging at the end of the so-called Judiciary Committee.
Okay, caller, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Mr. Davis, you can respond as you wish.
I guess I don't think that anyone thought that Judge Barrett failed any test at that confirmation hearing. I think that most people, including Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, was impressed with Judge Barrett and how she answered the questions. And you know, as for the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee acting like adults and getting along, I think that's a good thing for our country.
Judge Barrett was asked several times about this idea of recusing herself from certain cases being so close to the election. Do you think she took the appropriate stance, and if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, judges are not going to pre-commit whether they're going to recuse or not recuse on cases. And I think people need to remember with recusals on the Supreme Court, it is much different from the lower courts, and there's a reason it's different. There is a presumption that Supreme Court justices do not recuse from cases, and the reason is there are only 9 of them, and they're not interchangeable. You cannot substitute in new justices from other courts like you can on the courts of appeals or the district courts. On the lower courts, there's a different standard for a recusal because of that reason. And the reason they have a presumption that you don't recuse on the Supreme Court is you don't want litigants or outside parties playing games and trying to sway the votes of the Supreme Court based upon these bogus ethical charges or these bogus recusal charges that we're seeing from the Democrats during Barrett's confirmation hearing. No one even raised the idea that Justice Kagan or Sotomayor or Breyer or the other Democrat-appointed judges had to recuse on any case involving the president who appointed them.
Here's Sonia from West Virginia, a supporter of Judge Barrett. You're on with our guest.
Hi.
You're on. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. I just wanted to make a comment that, I've been watching the hearings whenever I can in between work. And my 16-year-old daughter, who's home from school, came in the room and she was watching a little bit with me. And it was just amazing. She was amazed at how Amy Barrett didn't take notes, how she kept her composure. And thinking of our young generation, and hopefully they'll watch this in school, I don't know. But to see people be able to discuss and talk with keeping their composure, and, it was just amazing to have an example of what we should be doing. We should be able to talk and discuss things. And, I feel like that's what, Amy Barrett's going to bring, to the courts and hopefully give some examples to our younger generation who need desperate good role models.
And that's Sonia from West Virginia. Mr. Davis, we also have a tweet from Jim Buck who writes this. To you specifically, do you think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg would view Judge Barrett as a product of Justice Ginsburg's successes in elevating the potentials for all women?
The late Justice Ginsburg was a wonderful person. When I clerked for Justice Gorsuch on the Supreme Court briefly to help him get set up, there is a tradition that the justices meet with each set of law clerks. There are 4 clerks for each justice, and they meet with the clerks It's a great place. Justice Ginsburg is a very principled person, or was a very principled person, and I think that she would, if she were still on the court and Justice Barrett were replacing a different justice, Justice Ginsburg would welcome Judge Barrett just like she welcomed Justice Gorsuch, just like she welcomed Justice Kavanaugh with open arms and very warmly.
So, Mr. Davis, since you're familiar with the experience, if Judge Barrett is confirmed, what's the process of getting her ready to go to the Supreme Court, and what's happening now, or is some of that already happening behind the scenes?
What do you mean, like getting her ready, like moving across the country?
Her office, you know, the clerks, that kind of thing. Does that process start now, or does it start exactly after she's confirmed?
Well, it really starts exactly after she's confirmed. I know, you know, with prior confirmations that the justices have to be ready to go the second they're confirmed, because once they're a justice, and they're expected to start working. I remember Justice Gorsuch was confirmed, and we went from the Senate to the Supreme Court that day and started working immediately. So, yeah, I mean, she'll have to have her, I imagine that she'll have her 4 law clerks lined up and ready to go for the second she's confirmed, because she'll be working right away.
This is Mike Davis. The Article 3 Project. He's the founder and president. Article3project.org is the website if you want to check out their work. Mr. Davis, we thank you for talking to us and our viewers.
Thank you, Pedro.
Coming up, we are going to change topics to the topic of health care. Leslie